for many of us, we think that so long as our thoughts are not materialized in some form, they're not going to have an impact on others. So long as basically our intentions are still internally kept with us, close to us, held tightly to us, as they say, held tightly to your chest or kept in your heart, then they're not going to have a bearing, they're not going to have any kind of an influence on others. And that is completely false. The gradation, the level of influence is key here to consider, because they definitely will have an impact. When you touch someone, you are transferring thoughts, you are transferring feelings, you are transferring part of you. In fact, when you touch something and someone else comes and touches that thing, there will be some of your energy signature left. This is not mysticism, this is not spiritual something woohoo, something new agey. No, this is a fact. In the, I think it was 50s or 60s, there was a Russian scientist who came up with a machine that later on came to be called Kirlian photography. And what he was doing, it was recording the aura that's generated, the electrical charges that were released from your fingertips, from the person's palms, from the hands. This was, for the first time ever, evidence, undeniable evidence, that energy is being transferred from one's body. Eventually people have tried to capture the different nuances of energies that people put out. But we're still far beyond as far as, really understanding the scope of it. We, as in science, scientific, current modern technological, etc., comprehension of such phenomena. Because we still look at what is observable, and even that, it has to be agreeable to the current psyche of society, what is acceptable, etc. Meanwhile, people are always transferring energy. When you step into a room, what type of a room is it? In other words, what type of people are occupying that room? That's why this reminds me of when I was a high school teacher, and let's say I was teaching biology class, so we're talking high school, 10th grade, 9th grade, or even, 12th grade, 11th. So you're doing sciences, and so basically the adults, almost adults, as in age-wise, 18. Some people argue they're not adults. Okay, fine. But the energy of the room would be different. Versus, at times I would get a call, especially when I was in the staff room and taking a break, let's say. I didn't have a class. It was my prep time, okay. And another teacher would have, let's say from the kindergarten or ECE, she would call and say, oh, please, could you come to the room because I have to go and take care of something. I have to maybe go to the bathroom or something. And I would leave everything, just jump on the other side of the campus and just, because it was, that school was a K through 12 school. And then I would go there. And then as the moment I would walk in, surrounded by these beautiful children, the tallest of whom could not even reach my knees in some cases, I would go in there and they would look up, like straight up, with necks tilted, and they would be so like excited, exhilarated. Before I would even approach the door, I would feel their energy. And the doors would open, and then the teacher would say, oh, this is the teacher, you've met him before, you've seen him on campus. Yeah. The kids would be just like, and then everybody would say something. Some children would be bringing me a drawing of theirs or something. So the energy would be completely different than how it was upstairs with the, high school kids. We ignore that for some reason. Why? That is very real. I don't need an MIT, certified some type of a gadget that picks up some energy signatures for me to go, oh, and some geniuses to go ahead and write a study on this and then say, oh, okay, so this is it's undeniable. I don't need that to prove to me that it is an undeniable fact. Why do we care when a person is not smiling to us? Especially if it's somebody you know, or there's a different expression on their face or in their body. What do? Our bodies react to that, okay? And sometimes we're pushed away by that. We don't like that because it puts you, depending on the energy signature, again, I'm using certain phrases or words that are somewhat acceptable in society. We can relate to these terms. Just like we can relate to certain energies, and we don't like certain other energies. So it's not the words, because many times people will say, there's so many books written on this, and especially many people have been making so much money for decades talking about, communication, verbal communication versus non-verbal communication, etc. There was Professor Mehrabian from UCLA in the 80s who did the research, and he saw that, in fact, over 90% of communication is non-verbal. Very small portion is verbal, like the words we use. So much of it is not language-related, verbal language. That means the tone of your voice, the body, the movement, the posture, the gaps in between your words, the size, the breath, which direction you're looking at, etc., etc. That, again, however, is still superficial, I say. Why? Because, well, when you look at it on the body level, when you go inside the body, underneath the skin, when you get around the muscles, before you touch the muscles and the internal organs, inside the muscles, inside the chest cavity, inside the rib cage, around the lungs, around the heart especially, and all throughout the body, you're covered with this material that we call it in the West fascia. Fascia. In some circles they call it the lymphatic system. Okay, fine, whatever the term you use. People go and exercise, people go and do many hours of yoga, many hours of, cardio, this and that, lifting, but without realizing that the joints are very limited. The joints don't have any muscles. I kept telling people in my years when I was a trainer, fitness trainer, don't use the knees, don't use the joints to lift heavy weight, including your own. Use the muscles around it. Work on the muscles around it. When you're sitting, when you're getting up. Not only that, I would teach them how to use their mind first. So before the muscles and the joints, obviously, that mechanism goes into action, you have to make sure the mind is active. Meaning it is directed in that, into that motion. In that direction it's headed. So your intention is very important. This is what I would teach my elderly clients that would come, or overweight clients. And then the life would change of the person. But something else I was noticing, their mood was also changing. So the mind and the fascia work hand in hand. So the energy, and then the person was very jovial, the person would become. Really, the energy would be lighter, more colorful, more free, more relaxed, just like those kids in the kindergarten. There are cases where individuals, like especially in the Midwest, where there are tornadoes in places like Oklahoma, Nebraska, other places like that, flatlands basically, and then you have powerful tornadoes. And there was one case that I became aware of, where there was a trailer home where there were two brothers, I think, from what I remember. And it's basically, it's called a trailer home, but it's a house. You enter it, it's a house. It has chandeliers, it has sofas and whatever that normally people have in a living room. And then they feel this movement. They weren't aware of it, because one of them was aware that something was going on, because he was awakened. The other, I think the brother, was still asleep. Now the tornado comes and rips apart the trailer home. Half of it is gone. Literally, half of it is torn like a wafer, like a cookie. Cut and thrown. The tornado takes it up, and so they think, by the way, the other half of the house is where the other brother was, who was asleep. Okay? Now the one who was awake, quasi-awake, he has scratches, this and that, maybe broken ribs or, injuries, but he survives. And then, meanwhile, after the chaos is over and police is there and news coverage and all that, and people are wondering, and everybody's trying to look for survivors, because it, just tore through a trailer park where people lived, communities. And then, to their surprise, they see the other brother walking back, trying to look for his other brother, worried about him. And everybody's shocked because they thought he was dead. And he's got very, very minor injuries. No bones, no broken, no nothing. The scientists were puzzled. The doctors were really puzzled. The TV guys journalists were like amazed. And obviously the audience was like, what? The people who were watching this news. Apparently, when he was asleep, the body is so relaxed, completely relaxed. And he was apparently a heavy sleeper. So all that motion, all that movement, the chandeliers being apart, the house coming apart, it broken in half, lifted off the ground by a few 100 feet at least, moved, turned, swirled in a spiral up, like in a blender basically, giant blender. And then in all that chaos, his body is completely relaxed. And then he lands hundreds and hundreds of yards away. And then wakes up on impact. So it was just some people would say, is his luck or fortune that his body touched some surfaces. But he did not resist. This is key. Because so many of us hold energy in us. So this is when you're holding tight, when you're holding tension in your body, you lock the fascia. And fascia needs motion. Fascia needs gentle stretching. Flexibility, plasticity is called also, to allow the energy to move. Now in Chinese medicine, acupuncture, qigong, tai chi, what they do is, well, the qi energies are where? This has been a major source of confusion and separation for Western and Eastern medicine, etc. But during the last decade or so, there's been major discoveries where they're seeing how the energy channels, the thousands upon thousands of energy channels, and the meridians are not that many thousands, there's 12 of them, but the points and the minor network of channels, they're really, you can't number them. But they primarily exist in what we call the fascia. Thanks to the fascia is why the qi moves. And it's because of the blockage of the fascia that energy doesn't move. What happens? You get sick, you experience pain. There's tightening going on. Now you cannot remove a fascia and place it in someone else. That's why Western medicine in the 70s or 80s, they were in complete denial of, it's just folk medicine, this whole acupuncture business. It's just, placebo and all that effect. Why? Because they dissected bodies and they didn't discover a single energy point, a single meridian. They haven't discovered it. So if it doesn't get to be seen, it doesn't exist. Well, that's what happens when the body dies. Fascia is gone. You can't. It's like the remnants of it is there. To help you understand this, imagine a chicken breast. And there's this thin, invisible film around it. It looks sticky, and you pull on the chicken skin, and then this thing starts pulling out. It's almost like plastic sheet. So it's not plastic, it's very organic, mind you. But there's no more channels there anymore. It's gone. It's dead. The body's dead. There is no circulation. Qi, there's no circulation in Indian philosophy, or yoga rather. It's called prana. Yeah, the energy, it's prana. In Chinese medicine, it's qi. In Korea, it's ki. In Japan, it's ki. Anyhow, it's the same thing. We are transmitting our inner state to the world around us. That's why when you're really happy, people start feeling drawn to you. Children will come close to you. Animals will approach you. But if it's the opposite, you will force them away from you. And then if a person is using all the strategies, they've read a lot of biohacking and all that stuff, books, NLP and all that, and they say, how come I'm still not really? Eventually people realized my energy is this, and they walk away. How did that happen? How can I fake it? How can I make it work? Well, that's the thing. You can't fake it. That's why the change has to happen from inside. That's why all these people who go and read books, again, as I said, the biohacking thing, that's a big thing nowadays. Watch or listen to some podcasts, and so they're taking in information, and that information, let's presume it's accurate, it's right for them, it's healthy. There is information like that, sure. But what is happening to that information internally for the person? Is it transforming them? Okay? That alchemy has to happen, where it's no longer information. Otherwise, it's just mental junk. Undigested food, and any undigested food in the gut is actually poison. So you're faking it. It doesn't work. For example, when I mentioned acupuncture, so I'll just use one from that past. The first time I went to get an acupuncture a treatment, I had read about this and I was so excited, and I was like, oh, this is going to be great. It's my first time, and I was like, I want to see how. And I wasn't afraid of the needle. I was like, and the person just puts it very, very nonchalant, casually, and then very coldly. And first there was some exchange of questions, and what's the problem area, what do you, etc. Fill out some forms, okay. And then they leave the room, okay, while you are basically, you have all these needles. I was like, okay. And you're hearing the person going around room to room. I didn't know this, but they just put a clock, just like the chiropractors do. They just put you on this thing, a machine, or on these heat pads, and they walk away to go to serve the next patient or customer, client somewhere in the other room. And then I've actually been forgotten sometimes. The practitioner, the doctor, the chiropractor, acupuncturist, they've forgotten that I was there. I think it happened twice. One time with a chiropractor, another one. Because they have, depending on how big of a clinic they have. But the issue was not that for me at that time. And I'm waiting for, 20 minutes or so. Sometimes they come in and they're like, oh yeah, is okay. Sometimes they tease or, just move the needle a little bit deeper or something and adjust it. And then they go back. And just basically allowing nature or something, air, the ether as they used to call it, to do the job of healing for you. It doesn't work like that. But then I just, just lost faith in acupuncture and all that because of that incident. But this is what's happening today. But just to kind of recap on this, the acupuncturist, it could be anything. It could be a massage therapist. It could be your coworker who uses the same keyboard. Okay, the energy, that's what I was beginning, talking about, right? The healing happens not because of the needle. The needle is simply a conduit that is attached or pointed at the energy, the meridian or the point underneath it. So it's a receiver, think of it. Well, what is it going to receive? The person who's supposed to be the healer is the one who facilitates the healing. Their energy is important, which is not something that most teachers and schools and universities of acupuncture teach around the world, not just in the West, even in China. Unless you find a very, very good teacher who really has embodied the art. It is an art. It's a beautiful art. It's a healing art. And then healing takes place. But you have more of a relationship in such a room with the clock that's ticking, and and sometimes it gets cold, even though they have some heaters some places. So now that body part is naked, and it's got the needles all sticking, and it's very cold. On different levels, it's cold. Now, you don't have to just look at this within the arena of acupuncture or Chinese medicine. You can just look at this in the field of Western medicine. I can't tell you how many times I was stunned when, after waiting in the, finally you get in. This is in America, by the way, in the United States. From the waiting room into the actual room where you were going to be seen by a Western doctor, an MD. They come in, and sometimes they don't even look at you. They have a chart. Previously they would write. Now they don't even have that because it's already filled out. They just have to click on an iPad like a screen. They don't touch you. They don't touch and examine the body, which is a job of a doctor to do. So previously there was some energy transfer when they would, get the stethoscope and put it here and there. Sometimes they still do, but there is no handshaking, there's no nothing. There's no eye contact in many cases. And one time I actually measured how many minutes would be this encounter. And I was told that it's about 1 minute 49 seconds type of thing. But previously, I remember, it would be minutes and minutes and minutes. People would come and knock on the door, asking the doctor to go, somebody has a question. But then it even dropped below a minute, where they come in, they say, oh, okay, so let's do that, and let me order these, blood tests, the blood work, okay, all right, come back in 2 months or something, whatever. Because they already had somebody else come in and ask you questions, which is on the chart. And what if you have some questions? And in that chaos, many a time a patient forgets the key questions to ask because they now are being rushed by the doctor, supposed doctor, the physician. The energy is completely off. A fast food joint actually feels more humane than that room occupied by, or visited rather, by a white coat wearing physician whose job is to heal, help you heal. But in this world that we live, it's becoming far less. It's about number, it's about volume, it's about how much money you make, how much turnover. We're talking about patience. And you just spend 2 hours sitting there in a waiting room 2 hours. And then you get in. If the physician sees you, usually it's the physician assistant who's not a doctor at all. They just taken some courses and they pass some tests and that's it. Legally, they can see you under the supposed supervision of the MD. All these, there's no life. So what are we talking about? Fascia. There's no life. It's like a teacher who comes into the classroom with an agenda, a lesson plan, and he doesn't care what's happening in the classroom. A student might be off their normal behavior. Maybe they're sad. Or maybe they're not paying attention. Has his back turned to the students and writes some things on the board. Okay. Gives a little bit of a lecture, passes out their tests. Okay. Meanwhile, there's another part of the room, there's chaos. He's completely ignoring that. There's bullying going on. He's completely ignoring that. And students are not even paying attention, a big chunk of them. But hey, he's on the clock, he's doing his job, and he's looking at the clock, and boom, the bell goes, he goes. Unfortunately, in many situations, this is what we have dropped down to. The energy we have says everything. You can go into massage therapy treatment, and 5-10 minutes into it, you want to run out of that place as soon as possible because the energy is completely off. Sometimes the energy is so disgusting, or it's disharmonious. So, yes, you have to pay attention to these facts. Okay? To these facts. These are very important. And you cannot switch, as I was saying. For example, male and female energy are very different. Very different. But when you have people who were, I remember some years ago, I was in a classroom where the supposed instructor was insisting that everybody calls him a him, and because he has chosen for himself a male name, and meanwhile he's born a female, and then he wanted to change that. Because in her/his mind, she or he was very much, and you couldn't tell, like the confusion. And he was insisting that he was a man now, 100%. Because he's also gotten some surgeries done, deforming his arm. And I thought he had an injury, or a tiger bit off a portion of his forearm, and and I was asking a question. I was very naive in that, and he says, "No, I use that. They use that to augment my body. To now I'm a male. This and that." And I said, "Wow, okay." The energy was completely off. You can feel the energy shift because your body recognizes another body. So there are certain things that modern science is unable to yet, as we've been talking about this, fascia. I remember he had written on the board his initials, his preferred pronouns. Not preferred, demanded pronouns. I laughed because the security guard came in, the parking attendant, and he turned, the parking attendant turned to the one who was presenting the workshop, and he said, "Excuse me, ma'am, this and that, and then he turns to us and he says, if you have a question, you have to ask her about this, so he's now he doesn't care about any of that because he's seeing a woman. Okay? Meanwhile, I was looking around the room and I was listening. I wanted to give it a benefit of a doubt. The person was so pushing for trying to convince everybody, including themselves, that they are now a man. Similarly, you have people who would do the same thing and considering themselves a female. I was a layman, of course, at the time. I was doing this was during my therapy, psychotherapy courses at the university. And I'm like, what about evolution? What about all these? So you're saying it's all about physiology, and you can go into like a butcher house and they can cut you up, cut off pieces and add more pieces, and that would make you a woman? That would make you a man? That's nonsense. Because it does not take into consideration what is beyond the appearance, because you cannot change the energy of the body, whatever the body is radiating. You can change the look of it. You can put on makeup. You can make yourself pass as a woman if you're a man, or a man if you're a woman. Make up this and that. Voice is going to be difficult, but it's doable. Behavior, mannerisms, if you've done some acting classes and taken some, But otherwise, who are you fooling? Just like a person who's trying to do a treatment, acupuncture treatment, but they're not in it. They're walking away from you as you're laying there half naked with so many needles on you, and they're doing the treatment. Now, who's doing the treatment? 20, 30 minutes, 40 minutes later, the session's over. They come and pluck out all those needles and then, and say, okay, come back next week, or come back in a few days to do the whole thing again. This is not healing. This is not acupuncture. This is not massage. This is not... Who are we kidding, basically? So sometimes we think that we are, we're outsmarting nature. That's why it's a joke when people were doing the pronoun thing. Still, some segments of society, they might not like this, but it's a fact. I'm sorry you don't like it, but who cares? Ultimately, this is evolution. This is life. This is a fact. Your energy doesn't lie. That's what I'm trying to say. Because if you're confused, no amount of makeup is going to cover it. No amount of... you might hide it, you think. But you won't be able to convince everyone. You can convince some people, but you won't be able to convince them all the time. Fool them. Because your energy will not be fooling anybody. Remember the Kirlian photography? I'm sure there are newer machines now, newer sensors that could detect. But the best one is our internal detectors. You will know. You will know if there was a case of a person who went in and she had specifically asked for a female masseuse. And they said, yes, we'll provide you one. So they didn't lose the customer, right? So she goes in and very, very quickly she feels. And the masseuse seemed very much a woman, like a woman. Talk to you, the name, this and that, effeminate voice, etc. But this woman, customer, client, felt so uneasy, felt so uncomfortable that she had to stop the session and then leave. Soon enough, And that was a very terrible experience later on, this woman expressed. Why? She was like, she felt awkward to even mention this, but she said, I don't know, but I think it was a guy. It was a man, not a woman. I had asked for a woman. Who are you kidding? That's what we're trying to do. That's what we have been trying to do. This is all nonsense. Okay? We have other problems in life. But I have to address these things because they are coming up. People do bring it up because there's confusion still in the world. There's other bigger problems than this. We don't have to add more confusion to the mix. So I'm just making these, to address some issues. And hopefully they will be useful. Sukhiyata.